So now we have our textures fit into our scene. We can continue out working on the next section, which is adding some color. So I've grouped all these textures into a layer, so you can see here's our original image that we started with. This is what it looks like with our textures overlapped. And now we're going to create another group for our color information. So there's a couple ways that we can kind of get our color going in. The first thing that I might want to do is maybe just start to tint the image. Now, one particular method is by going into the curves adjustment and starting to adjust the curves. Now, if I adjust the RGB values, I'm going to be adjusting the image in terms of its value. But if I start to swap over to the different color channels, I can actually start to color tint this particular image any particular way by adding or removing a particular tone or color. So for this particular image, let's go in and let's see if we can kind of get this to be looking a little bit more interesting. So I kind of like the greens, so what I'm going to do is just kind of keep this general color palette going, and I think that's kind of working pretty well. So we'll kind of leave that as our first starting point. What I might even want to do is go into that blue channel and actually maybe cool off my shadows here just a little bit, just so that I'm going to add some warm light coming in through the window, and I'm going to have a lot more cool light kind of going within the scene here. Another way to kind of start modifying colors is to go in and create an overlay layer. An overlay layer will allow me to select a color and get that color to interact with its layer down below. So if I select one tone, you can see how it's affecting the image. And if I select a darker version of that tone, you can see it actually starts to darken the image to that particular color. So an overlay layer allows me to both add color as well as value. So if I want to start warming up that scene, what I can do is I can start taking maybe my warmer tones. I can select an airbrush, which is a very soft airbrush, and with a low opacity and flow, I can start to just kind of add some color into this painting. So this is kind of like working in a transparent medium, such as watercolor, or glazing with acrylics or oils, and you're just basically adding washes of tones on top of this image. You can add as many of these layers as you need to, and again, really what you're doing is you're really just kind of colorizing, and you're adding a little bit of value and tone at the same time to your particular images. It's a great way of actually adding color and life back into your paintings. So I'm actually kind of happy with that. What we can also do now is actually create a new layer, and this can be a lighting layer, a way for us to start adding light into the painting. So we can set this particular layer here to a blending mode of color dodge. And what a color dodge layer will do as I start to kind of add paint now is it will take that color and it will start to really kind of mix it with the paint below and really try to brighten it up quite intensely to the particular tone of color that we have. So if I were to select red, you can see that it's going to start to kind of brighten up that kind of particular image. So one thing that I'll do is I'll right click on this layer and go to the blending options, and in order to get this to interact better with the layers below, I'm going to turn off the blend interior effects as group and turn this one off as well. Now I can just start to select my light. I can use a large airbrush, and I can just start to now paint my light into my scene. And now what's interesting about this is this, I can start to paint light wherever I want to. You can see it's really starting to lighten up that image. It's creating a little bit more contrast now. And when I'm happy with what I have, you can see up this atop this region, it's getting a little bit too bright. It's kind of blowing out a little bit too light. That's now because the light that I've chosen is a little bit too light in tone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select a darker tone, and I'm going to start to paint that back with a darker value. And that's going to start to bring a little bit of that detail back for me. Let's go even here with a darker tone. So bring it back, then select my color, and then kind of re-establish it. So now I've got this lighting in the scene. Here's that lighting layer. What I can do is I need to erase out where all my shadows are, because we have lighting just kind of spilling everywhere. So if I go in and I use my eraser tool, let's just use a harder edge brush. Let's just start to erase where some of that light wouldn't be spilling. So now we're starting to kind of create a directionality to where this light is coming through the window, and it's just kind of bouncing all around in here. Might definitely not be affecting these particular areas. Now if you need a little bit more control, you can lower the opacity and the flow. That allows you to get a much softer bleed. And also maybe underneath these stairs right here. Like the side parts of the stairs. We'll take the lighting down from there. Now you can be as careful as you need to. But what's nice about this is that you can relatively work pretty quickly and get some pretty good results without having to do too much work. Okay, so if we turn that layer on and off now we can see that light is kind of coming specifically just on certain parts of our image. Let's maybe darken this. And now that we've added some light, I can play with the levels adjustments. I can play with the opacity to make it stronger or lighter. And so that's one of the good things about having things on layers. And what I can do is call maybe this light layer, and we'll create a new layer here called shadows. So you can see all the changes that we're doing are actually using different kinds of blending modes to let the colors and tones interact with the layers below. So the shadows layer, I can set it to multiply and select a much darker, maybe cooler tone. And again, with my same airbrush, I can go in and just darken some of my corners. So now I'm creating a little bit more contrast. I'm thinking about how that lighting's coming in the scene and where I want the eye to kind of be moving, which is maybe towards this region. So let's kind of just darken some of this a little bit. And you can see how that's kind of just making a little bit more contrast to my image. And we don't want to throw things too much into black. We can always come back in with an eraser and erase out certain regions. Say like maybe here, where I want a little bit of light kind of hitting this board. Now you can play with many different kinds of layers like this. And once you're finished to start, that you've added your kind of lighting and stuff going in here, you can actually start kind of finishing up the painting by doing some sort of kind of last kind of rounds of color correction and any kind of effects paintings like atmosphere and fog and adding characters or doing whatever you need to kind of do. So I might go into here and use a curves or color balance or any of my color correction tools. And I'm just now taking what I've had before. So I had all these different layers with different colors all interacting together. And now I can take all the colors that were mixed and start to really play and experiment with trying to kind of create more interesting mood. So a lot of this would be taking a look at that image and seeing what about it creates an interest for you, and then start to kind of key off of that. I'm really kind of liking this greener kind of tone that I have with this image. So I'm actually going to kind of color key this green and see how far I can kind of push that. Now, you shouldn't limit yourself to not trying something. You can always kind of bring it back. And because this is an adjustment layer, you can always go back and create multiple different versions of this adjustment if you're not happy with it.